Now that's what I call a BloomBurrow set review.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
This episode is supported by our Durdle Maniacs, who enjoy ad-free content as well as bonus content that can be found either on Patreon, Spotify, or YouTube. If you're thinking about supporting the show, we'd really appreciate it, and you can find us on any of those mediums. What it do? Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
All right, bro. So people actually want a BloomBurrow set review. So we pulled the cards that are, I guess, discussable.
As Stan Lee once said, because you demanded it.
Because you demanded it, that's what you get. So now you got to endure that.
Yep. But before we go into all that, we missed one question, two questions, I suppose, on our question and answer episode, and it was literally the person who gave us the idea to do the question and answer episode. So, Sal, you're going to get your own part of an episode here for your questions. Question number one is for Phil. Phil, how does it feel to be the channel Zordon every week?
So I have always longed to be the purveyor of information and intrigue without actually doing a goddamn thing.
So, and I am the skull or the bulk. I don't know which, but I guess I do know which one's bulk and which one's skull just by the sheer nameness of their names. I guess that makes me skull because I mean that's like 6 head.
Bro, put on a hat and you'd be a great repulsor.
All right, and then question two for both. Do you ever feel like giving up on your pet deck? I told myself a while ago just to play 8 cast to keep fixing the puzzle. Problems around it kept running into walls, and I shifted to 12 post with 3-0-1. Do you think it's worth just playing the same thing every week, even though the feel bads are real? Let me start because I feel like you have a much more nuanced approach to this question, or at least you have. Like I changed my deck as things get bad. Like I started with Merfolk, and then my situation changed where I owned dual lands, and I was like, okay, I'll play duels. So then I was on Rug Delver, and I was on Rug Delver for a very long time. People who have been following this podcast since the beginning, there are some of you, there are many of you. Those people will remember that I used to play Rug Delver. I was very much in the Stifle Days Wasteland pile. And sometimes the deck would be bad. I would still play it for a while. And then I realized at a certain point that I just couldn't. The tidal wave was too much. And I switched over to Infect for a while the metagame sort of shifted out. So I like to take a look at the metagame and sort of decide what deck I think attacks it, at least with the cards I own, the best, and move from there. But I do have like a style of play I like to achieve. To that end, I think the question is more directed at Phil, who probably has a much different response to it.
People who have watched 90s MTG for a long time or have known me for a long time, I mean, I was a wild card brewer was my gimmick well before
Black to basics.
Yeah, before I became like the dedicated diehard and lone miracle bro left on the planet that's willing to take all these lumps and, go 1-5 every week. Yeah, I mean, I always have enjoyed the creativity that deck building offers, right? That's part of the cool thing about it. But as the format made it so that doing those types of things just became absolutely untenable. So like essentially once War of the Spark came around and the power creep just like was so arbitrarily increased to such a degree that sort of brewing without things that are just like A+B combo decks, I found to just be nonsensically bad. They like it. You just couldn't actually, or at least I couldn't accomplish anything that I wanted to with my brews because there just wasn't the space for it within the format. Like the things that keep the format in check, so to speak, just outsize that sort of thing. Unless something new comes in that is just like clearly a power mistake, like Nadu or something creating some new deck lists. So for a long time I was a brewer, and then it wasn't until that arbitrary power creep made it so that every single brew was just like a failed experiment, and that felt bad to the point where I was like, I don't think it's the fact that like these ideas aren't necessarily working. Like they seem to work, except you need like to shave a mana and a half to 2 mana off of everything in order for it to be like even remotely close. And so once that became recognizable to me, I became just like really, really steadfast in Miracles because it was my favorite deck to play. It was always like the kind of puzzle that I really enjoyed. It's, I enjoy nothing more than drawing cards, but thinking about like, would you ever sling off your pet deck? Dude, literally every moment of my life, I'm trying to get away from this deck that can't win. Like, it isn't like Miracles isn't good, but I'm a diehard and I love it, and I love the insurmountable hill that I mean I'm literally Sisyphus rolling the thing up the mountain, man. Like, I'm aware of it. I know it's never going to get up there unless I get one of those like arbitrary busted power creepy cards that just overhaul an archetype in a matter of seconds that requires no work from me whatsoever. So yeah, every day I would love to play something different. The thing is, every time I play something different, nothing ever seems as interesting or engaging or like. I mean, I've tried to play Delver a couple times. Like, I hate it. I've tried to play Green Sun Zenith decks a couple times. They just feel clunky. Anything that doesn't have Brainstorm and I draw a card, I'm like, I guess this card's in my hand for the rest of the game, and I don't have any agency. Like, I've tried other things, and I like nothing speaks to me the same way that I'm sure that like players who only ever cast Green Sun Zenith stick to it for life. So, you find your niche, but like very much, I would love to like move off of this and play something that's actually both competitively viable and like continuously engaging to me. And every time I try and play anything other than Miracles, I always am like, why aren't I just playing the thing I enjoy? And there have been a couple of episodes where we've been like, even if it sucks, just play what you enjoy, because like at the end of the day, you should like enjoy your hobby. And you always hope and pray that there's going to be a crossroads where you get the intersection of competitive viability plus the deck that you really, really love. Like, if you are the Days Wasteland Delver gamer, like, you got it good, man. Like, in Legacy, yeah. That's like you are the protected god, right? Like, that's the like I had this conversation with one of my buddies in my chat. You know the meme where they're like, ban everything until Tarmogoyf is good?
Yeah.
Well,
nuke the format, as it were.
Actually,
right?
What it is it's ban everything until Delver is good. Like, the baseline of how it always actually goes is ban everything till Delver is good. So being in that spot where there's like a swath of people that like are just like, this should be the protected best deck at all times because it's like the fair interactive aggro, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, if that speaks to you, if that type of tempo game speaks to you, like, you are one of the fortunate ones that that we're in the timeline that it is positioned to be the case.
All right. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. So, Phil, before we get into the BloomBurrow episode, right, I want to a little self-promotion because we're going to be doing that debate series on our Patreon where you'll get to see us debate and defend whether or not certain cards should be banned before the ban list happens. But right now, Phil, I have a coin that is going to determine who is the defender and who is the prosecutor for different cards.
Bro, is this the Zerdle coin?
This is the heads I win, tails you lose coin.
Oh, okay.
So yes, the answer is yes. I can't pronounce those things names either.
They have no vowels, that's why.
All right. So the first one is Phil will be blue, Zac will be red, and we will determine who will defend Days right now on cast. So this is for our you'll get to see this episode if you're on our Patreon, but we're going to determine right now who defends Days. So flipping it right now. Red is Zac, blue is Phil. Phil has to defend Days.
It's gonna be an easy one for you, man.
Yeah. Phil defends Days. The next one is Entomb/Reanimate. Phil will defend Entomb/Reanimate.
It's gonna be an easy one for you, my guy. This is gonna be an easy series.
All right. And then what do we have? Ancient Tomb. Phil will be defending Ancient Tomb.
Okay, so I'm just the defendant. I'm just defending everything I love.
All right.
Like,
so that we can make this a little fair, I'm going to defend Ancient Tomb. And then we have one more. What was the other card that we put on the block? Was it Orcish Bowmasters? I feel like that's kind of so obvious. It's like right up there with Grief. Like those two cards should get banned. Was there another card?
I mean, we happy to prosecute Urza Saga.
Urza Saga. I will defend Urza Saga. So I will defend Ancient Tomb and Urza Saga. You will defend Grief Reanimate and Daze. So those will be the assignments.
I literally vomit my mouth at the thought of defending Daze, my dude.
No, I think this is great because you like I have plenty of ways to defend Daze. I think you have plenty of ways to defend Daze. You have, and we're not going to strawman this. You need to win this debate. That is very important. Like, we're not going to strawman this. This is a real debate. Like, at the end of this, there'll be people will vote on who did the better job. This is debate club. This is not set up a straw man so that you can defend it. WotC's not going to be watching this. They don't pay for our Patreon, so this is purely a Socratic method episode. I think. Well, it will be a couple of episodes.
I'm just going to show up to this debate in a scarecrow costume.
And that's the rules of the debate are going to be 2-minute opener. Let's see if I can find this real fast. 2-minute opener for each side. Prosecution goes first. Then a 1-minute response for each side, and then closing argument for 2 minutes. Prosecution ends the argument. So that will be a Patreon exclusive. If you're interested in checking that out, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/EternalDurdles. The $5 tier will get you in. That is either the Durdle Maniacs or Durdle Mania. Force of Will is our $10 thing. No difference in those, just you're helping out the podcast a little bit more. So with that said, let's talk about BloomBurrow. We have actual cards to share and talk about and give opinions about. Phil, start us off.
So the first card that I want to talk about, because it actually is a card that I'm interested in testing. I want to caveat that I do think that the power level of this set, by comparison to what we're used to these days, is underpowered because it's a typal set. So there's like a lot of synergy-based stuff that just does not exist in Legacy.
There's a lot of parasitic design,
Yeah, the only things that really exist in Legacy that are typal are really just individual power level glutted together. So think like Red Stompy that just happens to play a bunch of goblins, or Eldrazi, right? Like, it's not like these things have really anything in tandem together with each other. Like, the goblins don't really work together in Red Stompy. They just happen to be goblins. And Eldrazi doesn't have any synergy with each other. They just all cost half of what they're supposed to because...
Yeah, the synergy is that the lands make them cost less.
Yeah, so like in that way, like typal designs like don't really exist in Legacy because the price point for those types of things to exist is just non-feasible.
You literally have to present a Blood Moon in blue for Merfolk to exist.
And even then, it's not, right? Even then, it's not there. So it's like, in order for that stuff to happen, you just have to presume that you can have cards that like require other cards to be good. And if they're not doing combo things that end the game immediately, then they just don't exist in the format. So you could look at like, Cephalid Breakfast as like, underpowered cards, but they create an I win button on the spot, right? So like there's room for that space because winning is good. But when it comes to like, classic goblins, like you're going to be struggling unless you're the one of specialist that's happy to go, 2-3-3-2 every league. You're not going to run into the Merfolk player gamer that's doing well in similar space, right? Even when you get like some power increases, because the inherent foundation of what those decks require is non-tenable in the format. So caveating that this is all under, like, I think all the power level of this set is underwhelming, but there were enough people that wanted a BloomBurrow set review, and there's actually one card that I do that like I personally will be testing and would do in earnest even without that caveat, which is Stormchaser's Talent, which is a blue enchantment, costs 1 blue, and it's a class, and it says when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. And then it has level 2, which is 3 and a blue. So you can only activate it as a sorcery. You pay 3 and a blue, and then you level up, and then you get this ability, which says when it becomes level 2, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And then it has for 5 and a blue at level 3, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. Now, the reason that I'm interested in at least testing this card is for like my lens is through Miracles as a control player, and this is a 1-mana spell. Like, it's a 1-mana threat, right? So it is cheap to get under the compression of the format. right? Like you can cast it off of your main color where you're going to be able to get basics, and you are like it is not a higher end threat that's 3 or 4 plus mana that you're just asking yourself to get blown out by Wasteland and never being able to cast it, or to walk into Daze. So, and then once the effects of activating as, I mean, it's only a sorcery, but once you level up, unless somebody's stifling that activation, they're uncounterable activations, right? So like to regrow an instant or sorcery at level 2, that is an uncounterable thing unless they're playing specifically like a stifle effect. And that means that you'll be able to pull whatever card you need, whether that's a removal spell or another counter spell. So it is grindy, right? Like you even though it is 1 mana plus 4 mana, it is effectively a regrow, and it is a threat that lets you get onto the board to pressure things in pressure against opponents that you otherwise would really struggle against as a control opponent, as a control deck. So, for example, if you're playing against a Planeswalker, it's really tough to get a Planeswalker off the table when you're not trying to play creatures in your Wrath of God deck, right?
Yeah.
But this having just like a cheap end token that can get bigger. I mean, it's a monk, right? Like
it's a monk.
Everybody who's ever played with Monastery Mentor, even though this is blue and red and is affected by the blasts, like the Monastery Mentor pumped out 1/1 white monks, and that had prowess. And this is,
and your opponent has to decide if they want you to like keep that Stormchaser's talent on the board, or they want to blast a token, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be susceptible to the blast, but the difference is that it only costs 1 instead of however much normally a blast would trade up with for whatever else you were doing in a control deck. I think at level 2, like the odds that you are going to use this in level 2 in grindy matchups, I think is actually fairly reasonable. Like if you're in matchups where that matters, there's a lot of like if you pay 4 and then rebuy Force of Will or something that's free interaction, then that is face up on the table. That might change behavior for your opponent. Now, you have to show them before you do anything because you have to activate it as a sorcery. But that's not necessarily bad in the fact that like it has another card built in.
It telegraphs a play that you want them to know you're making too. You know.
Yeah. And I also think that like I have played many a game where I've played Monastery Mentor and made a token, and then they killed the Monastery Mentor, and then I rode that token out to victory because they just either couldn't have another removal. Because like anytime you cast anything where you're just trying to interact, like chunking them for 2 or 3 every turn, like that is
it gets you.
Yeah. So I like that. And then the 5 and a blue effect really reminds me of what people did when they would hard cast Shark Typhoon.
Yeah.
So you hard cast Typhoon, and then it's the same thing. I mean, Shark Typhoon is non-creature, and then you get that size thing for a shark that flies, where this is only making a 1/1 monk. But the difference is that if you played Shark Typhoon at 6, you're likely tapping out or getting close to tapping out for a very chunky spell that they can interact with on the stack. Where this is an activated ability for
it's on there, just sitting there.
That is happening. So it would be sorcery speed all the same to put that effect onto the table, and but it's uncounterable. So then you'll be able to actually convert some monks. And at that point, once you pay 6, then you just have Monastery Mentor on the table, right? So if you think of like I'm activating for 6, and then it's just every instant in sorcery just makes a monk. Like if you were to think like this card is part Monastery Mentor, part regrow, and then it's just sort of baked into a 1 mana card that also happens to be blue, then you're seeing like a bunch of disparate pieces that sort of feel like a Moto spell almost. Like you have to go in the modes in order, but like I think that there's enough power baked into all of those cards all being on one thing that at the barrier to entry to get it onto the board is just 1 mana, that I think it's worth testing at the very least. So I'm going to pick these up. I'm going to test them out. And I think
we'll bookmark that card then.
This is the one case where I don't have high hopes that it'll be good enough. I think it's probably the activated abilities. Like, imagine that if it was 2 and a blue and like, imagine the activated abilities were a mana cheaper, then maybe we're actually in a space where it's viable. It's probably too expensive right now, but I'm going to put it through the ringer.
All right. So next up we have Mockingbird, which is 1 blue and X for a creature bird bard that is a 1/1 flying, and you may have it enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the total amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except that it's a bird in addition to its other type, and it has flying. I think that's the important thing that a lot of people aren't realizing. It's the total amount of mana, not X. So it's like Prismatic Ending, right? Where like you maybe you pay 2 mana on Prismatic Ending, but you don't have to like you don't get rid of a 1X thing. So you're trading equally as far as what the mana value is on this. I was looking at before. I was like, oh, this is like less good than what's the guy Phantasmal Image, but this is actually I think as good as Phantasmal Image.
So I think there are some spots where it may not be as good. For example, if your opponent just put an Atraxa into play, Phantasmal Image is going to be better for you in that.
Sure.
Excuse me. But I think that Mockingbird, for the way that the world is going to be post-grief, like initially post-grief, if you think that, like, if you can go back to before, I want to just quickly highlight, I remember at some point we talked about, and I've heard other people talk about, like, oh, grief was around, and maybe we even brought it up in earnest, but everybody was talking about why is it grief had been around for as long as it was, and scam wasn't the issue that it became, and it's because Lord of the Rings came out. So Lord of the Rings adding Orcish Bowmaster and Troll to the Scaminator package made it a thing, and then Psychic Frog came out, and at that point Bowmaster wasn't as good. But like, if you can imagine before then, when the format was just half Bowmaster, and the play pattern of Bowmaster on Bowmaster was the only thing that the format was about, and it was really boring and uninteresting. And that was, you either play Bowmaster or you lose to Bowmaster. And the only way to beat an opposing Bowmaster reasonably was with your own Bowmaster. And it was just, everybody just Bowmastered each other. And that was it. It was Bowmaster the format. So, I mean, in that space, this is
a Bowmaster.
This is a Bowmaster. This is another Bowmaster. I also see that this is, if, everybody is now on Psychic Frog's ass about being too strong. And this is a 2-mana Psychic Frog against your opposing Psychic Frog. Except this one always has flying instead of needing to activate to have flying. Now, there's some benefit that, you activate the thing and can still give it flying. So even though it already has flying, you can still use the activated ability to remove cards to pump your Murktide or whatever. But this card, I think, because of those things, because it can copy the cards that I imagine are going to be very prevalent post-Grief world, that it's blue, it's cheap, it is relevant against a bunch of cards that, are the top contenders in the format. I just see it being like a reasonable role player as another option, and the baseline is also 1-mana 1/1.
All right, next is Thunderclap Trainer. That is 1 in a blue for a Otter Wizard. That is a 1/2 Offspring 4. Let's talk about Offspring real fast. You may pay an additional 4 mana to cast a spell. If you do, create a copy that is a 1/1 token. So you basically get a second one if you pay 6 mana for this thing. When this creature enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So it's Augur of Bolas, but you get to look at one extra card.
Bro, how we forget. Also, all the disrespect that I've heard about Augur of Bolas, everybody saying this card's unplayable. Don't get me wrong. It is unplayable. But it is... Augur of Bolas was, look at the top 3
instants and sorceries, right?
Sorceries. This is non-creature, non-land. This is the front half. This is a Narset activation, right?
All I'm saying is that this is Augur of Bolas profitably blocked a Jackal Pup, my guy.
Bro, this is another ETB wizard, which has been thing.
We need them.
We need ETB wizards for our Flame of Anur decks that'll never come.
Yeah,
and I really don't think this card is going to have the threshold enough. An Impulse is not playable.
We need to make Snapcaster Mage good again, as far as like the banning things till Goyf gets good again, and then this card will be playable.
I mean, if Snapcaster, instead of costing 1 in a blue, cost blue, then maybe it's considerable.
Yeah,
maybe you'd consider it in the format. Otherwise, okay, let's do a thought experiment. Snapcaster costs blue instead of 1 in a blue. Is it played?
Yeah, I think yes. I think 2 mana for to buy back your Swords of Plowshares and maybe block a guy, is actually pretty good.
What could possibly block in this format?
No, I'm just saying, like, just to gain you life, just to
I'm
roadblock something.
What could it possibly block? Everything flies or has
everything flies. This is true. A orc army token.
Bro, the block mechanic, it is non-existent in Legacy. This is not we do not get to block.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, how about this?
You're blocking, you're losing.
Can we add that to the debate forum? Is blocking you prosecute that blocking is a viable thing that is possible in the format, and I will.
So I will defend blocking, and you'll prosecute.
Yeah, I'm going to prosecute that blocking is.
We might add that as a extra episode after that.
Blocking has been power crept out. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Thunderclap Trainer, I just wanted to put some respect on Augur Bolas' name because everybody's shitting on this, and that's reasonable.
Pauper staple, man. Augur Bolas is a pauper staple.
Dude, I know, but to look like where they started, where they are now, like this is Augur Bolas, and it's an unfortunate turn. It's an unfortunate
Augur Bolas that gets to find Jace the Mind Sculptor. Not the worst.
You can find the old you can't cast.
Yep. All right. Wear Down. Wear Down is a sorcery for 1 green and 1 colorless. Gift a card, so you can give somebody the gift of drawing a card. And then if you gifted it, it's destroy target artifact or enchantment, so disenchant. If a gift was promised, destroy 2 artifacts and or enchantments. So basically you're getting that Force of Vigor effect, but your opponent gets to draw a card. The only difference here is you're spending mana, right? Like technically you're pitching a card for Force of Vigor. And the timing window is slightly different because Force of Vigor is like super instant where you can really only do it on your opponent's turn, whereas this is a sorcery.
Yeah, I mean, that's Force of Vigor is really the direct comparison here for where you would maybe consider it. The difference is that instead of you having to go down a card to catch 2 cards, in which case you'd theoretically be even, this one, it gives them a card to make up for the fact that you're destroying 2 things, so you don't actually have to go down any resources yourself. You're not disrupting.
You can top deck this and be like, woo!
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I don't know if this will show up, but I could see. I mean, I have played many decks where I'm like, man, I would like to have Force of Vigor, but my green count is just nowhere near reliable enough. And so I could see in a world where I'm like, my green count is too low to support Force of Vigor. So I'm going to play Wear Down instead because I want the effect of being able to catch up. And if I have to give my opponent a card in order to significantly disrupt them, that's something that's worth doing. But I think that this card is just like that obvious sideboard card. And the idea of letting your opponent draw a card sounds heinous. But in a Force of Vigor world, as the comparison, we're going down a card and that card needs to be green. And so your green requirements are going to be pretty stiff. I can imagine that this actually does see the light of day because you don't always have to gift the card and then it's just disenchant. And in those spots we're not totally off of it. Disenchant and its types are still playable.
All right, we've been joined by Brando. Carrot Cake is a white artifact for 1 and a white. Food. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 rabbit creature and scry 1, and you can also sack it to gain 3 life. 2 and sack it to gain 3 life. It's a food.
Yeah, I don't think this is good enough because, you just read the card out loud. But, come on, man. It's called Carrot Cake. How can we not at least give a nod to Carrot Cake? Who doesn't love Carrot Cake?
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Great.
Glarb Calamities Augur is a Sultai that is 1 black, 1 green, 1 blue. Legendary Frog Wizard Noble with Death Touch is a 2/4, and you can look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library, Surveil 2. Man, I kind of knew that this was a card you would be like, ooh, but why isn't it white?
My problem is that it's Sultai. I just don't understand why, I get green gets everything, and there's just nothing outside of green's palette anymore. And black has just been, pushed to also have everything. I guess this is black because it has Death Touch, it's instead of it being white and it having, I guess, life
vigilance.
That's the difference. But I think that being able to play lands off the top of your library, okay, we've seen Corsair or Crewfix types of effects before. Mm-hmm. They're not the worst, but usually they're on 3 drops, in which case they need some other additional kind of push. This one just being a future sight for mana value 4 or greater immediately. In a format that has Mystic Sanctuary, I have played many a Cemetery Illuminator, and being able to cast your free counter magic off the top of your deck by pitching cards. So you are essentially trading 1 for 1 off with your opponent's spell is pretty powerful. And if you have ways to manipulate the top of your library, a la Ponder and Brainstorm, and then this thing helps churn through the lands that would otherwise get stuck on
and
top.
surveils,
in ways that like a Cemetery Illuminator cannot. I could see this being actually pretty interesting. I think it is contingent upon the, for the most part, that like how many of those free spells do you actually have? Because otherwise, the way that this thing would churn through the top of the library is just by playing the lands off the top, in which case you can sequence. But I think if there is more to be found of this plus Force of Will plus something else that is worthwhile, I mean, I'm a sucker for Future Sight Effect. I'm waiting for them to give me one that is playable in the deck that I play. And if only this were just blue-white.
Yep. You could play Future Sight. I have.
We've all tried.
All right. Next up is Pond Prophet for Simic. You get a Frog Advisor. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. It's a 1/1. Tell me why, Phil. Why? Why are we talking about this card?
Elvish Visionary and Fibblethip and the long line of 2-drop 1/1s that draw a card when they ETB. Right. I mean, you got to give a shout. I mean, who are we? Zach, you and I are the longest running Legacy podcast in the game.
The game.
We may not have the biggest audience, but we've been here the longest.
Yes.
Shout out to the OG Nate Golia. All right. We got to give a nod to the nostalgia of the game of where, the playables have been before.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, to the OG Frog Advisor.
Oh, and then I want to talk about one thing that we talked about. So I was looking for ways to, protect my Mystic Sanctuaries and gain life. I'm always looking for these weird tools. And I found a card called Navigator's Compass. And it's and it's an artifact. And it says when Navigator Compass enters the battlefield, gain 3 life. And then it has tap until end of turn, target land you control becomes the basic land type of your choice, in addition to its other types. And I was like, hey, Zach, if I have this in play and I gain 3 life, and then my opponent can no longer wasteland me, right? Because I can turn my land into a basic. And then you were like, nope, the basic land.
Actually, first I said yes, and then I followed up 2 seconds later with, no, wait, it's basic type.
Yeah, so now this, I'm only bringing this up because I want to bookend it to that opening question of, do you want to get away from a deck that you want to play? And if me trying to think of maybe I'll play Navigator's Compass as a way to gain life and counter Wasteland.
No.
As a means, like if we're there, if our headspace is there, then I think this is we die on this hill. Unfortunately, I think this is like I think I will be hoping that we get a Sensei's Top replacement until the day that I'm dead, which maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now. Who knows?
All right, so that is all of the cards that we liked from the BloomBurrow set. If you have cards that you think were good, certainly write them in the comments. Talk to us in the comments below what you thought of this episode. What do you think? Days regenerate. Days reanimate. Entomb.
Please reach out to me on Discord and tell me all of the things about like why I'm wrong about why that shit should go. Because now I
might try to I might have us do that episode in 2 different ways where you do it, you defend it, I prosecute, you defend, which I think might be interesting as well. Except for I just said the same thing twice. Heads I win, tails I lose you. For
the episode, for the debate where I prosecute, I'll just link us to every 6 of 8 episodes that we do.
Yes. All right. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. If you have a chance, you have the means, and you'd like to, please support us at patreon.com/EternalDurdles, and we will catch you on the flip. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/EternalDurdles. Thanks so much for watching.